Hello! Welcome back to my channel. My name is Ray. I go by Sardonisms because I speak 3 languages, English, Spanish, and sarcasm. I've kind of indicated in, I think, a video and a short that I wanted to do like a reading roundup for the year so far. So this is me doing it. I have read a substantial number of books this year already, which is kind of exciting. Starting with, okay, it's hard to say exactly which of these was the actual start, but we're gonna go with So Let Them Burn. This is a Jamaican-inspired own voices fantasy involving dragons and gods who don't act quite human. Both of these are things that I enjoy greatly. I actually have compared the dragons in this very favorably against the dragons in Fourth Wing. I think they had similar starting points for their concepts, but I think this one executed them better. However, I like the personalities of the dragons in Fourth Wing better. We'll get to Fourth Wing, don't worry. So this one I gave a 5 stars on Goodreads. This was before I started my channel. I think I'm still at 5 stars, having reviewed a few more books. This is an exceptional book. The book straight up tells you that something is going to happen, and you're still taken aback when it actually hits. That is art. That is skill. I am extremely impressed that this is a debut book. This and the Hurricane Wars, which we'll get to, I read because of the whole Kate Corain situation. If you don't know that situation, I'm shocked because it seems like it took over BookTube, but in case you started BookTube in the last month or so, Kate Corain was a white debut author who review bombed a bunch of her fellow debut authors, most of whom were women of color and people of color. And then she got caught, and she's no longer going to be a debut author. She's no longer a debut author. She's no longer going to be an author. At least not unless she self-pubs. The premise of this is we're picking up like 5 years after a revolution. So we're looking at a tiny baby nation that is trying to maintain its independence because all of the other nations are like, but this nation has been colonialized for ages, and it's got resources, and we want them. What if we just took over? The European stand-in, the European colonizer stand-in, they have dragons. The nascent nation has what are called drakes, which are basically mecha dragons that kind of have souls. The main character, who's referenced throughout the synopsis, the little blurb on the front, the cover copy, that character is a chosen one 5 years after the prophecy was fulfilled. I freaking love subverting chosen one tropes. I've done some weird things with chosen one tropes in my writing. I've had, yeah, we chose you, but the prophecy was bullshit. I've had, we chose you, but prophecies are about as common as Tuesdays. This one is, we chose you, but that was 5 years ago, but you still have access to all your chosen one powers. And that's really cool and really well done. So that's So Let Them Burn. According to Goodreads, the next book that I finished was Gothicana. This is one of the more divisive books that I've read. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. I thought it was fine. I kind of rolled with it that she didn't have schizophrenia and she was actually psychic. I just rolled with it as that. It was never confirmed in the book. So reviewing Gothicana, I'm going to have a few more spoilers because I'm not going to recommend that you turn around and read it. Gothicana is a romance that also wants to be a thriller, or a thriller that also wants to be a romance. This was my biggest problem, was holy mood whiplash Batman. The jumps between, and now there's sex, and now someone's going missing, and now we're kissing, and now there's a possible killer on the loose, and now there's heavy flirting and lust, and now there's a threat to someone's life, and I was just like, pick a lane or get better at transitions. Shit, I was just looking forward to finding out who the killer is, and now they're making out. I was just getting into the steamy scene, and now we're on the topic of a murder mystery. That was my biggest problem with it. Again, I viewed her as not having schizophrenia. She's never diagnosed. I viewed her as being psychic, even though it's never confirmed. I just went with it because that made the book make more sense. It made it a better story, in my opinion. I also went with it that this is an alternate modern setting, so certain things that we take for granted here just don't exist. Certain laws, certain concepts just don't exist, and other ones do. I think the book works a lot better if you just roll with it with those two assumptions. 1, she's psychic, not schizophrenic. 2, it's not Earth. It's not our Earth. I gave it 3 stars. With those generous assumptions, it was fine. I don't regret reading it. I don't plan to reread it. Unless you have particular kinks that they do in the book, I don't recommend you go out and read it. It's kind of, that's fine. That was a book. That was definitely a book that did not completely waste my time. Yay! According to Goodreads, the next thing I finished was A Magic Steeped in Poison. This is another Own Voices inspired fantasy. This one is based on Chinese tea making. The author is Judy L. Lin, and actually, this is a funny story. So I do own this book. But I got the second book out of the library on accident. And I started reading, and I was like, we've really gotten just thrown in here. Now, mind you, I just read So Let Them Burn not long ago, so it wasn't an immediate alarm bell that, like, the big major fight seemed to have already happened. But I did kind of get this weird sense, like, is this a debut? And I go and I flip to the back, and this has a horizontal author's blurb. And it says, this is the sequel to A Magic Steeped in Poison. And I went, oh, my bad. So I went to the library and picked up A Magic Steeped in Poison. Then I thoroughly lucked into a find at my local bookstore where they had the hardcovers of each for, like, I think they were $6 or $7 each. So I totally snagged both. They had them in the bargain section because A Venom Dark and Sweet, which is book 2, had just come out in paperback, so all of the hardcovers had gotten shifted, and they had like 1 copy of A Magic Steeped in Poison left, and I was like, yes, please. And I hadn't even finished A Magic Steeped in Poison at that point, and I did not care. I still have not finished A Venom Dark and Sweet. It is still on my reading list. So this book, the magic system, is based around Chinese tea making, which is kind of like my favorite thing as a concept. I love unique magic systems. One of my favorite authors is Brandon Sanderson. That should pretty much tell you all you need to know about that. The words at the start of the cover copy for A Venom Dark and Sweet involved a mage whose magic is based on the ancient Chinese art of tea making, and I was sold. This book is sort of about a contest to become the royal Shen Nongshu. I hope this is Mandarin. The royal tea mage. It's one of the many books about a contest for a great title and power and wishes and everything under the sun. And also where the main character wasn't supposed to be in the contest at all. It is in that subcategory of mega contest is the plot. I feel like I should just make a genre or playlist about like challenge plots, because that's a lot of books. This one This book is so good that I had to stop reading because I was getting so angry on the main character's behalf. I got so mad I had to read this slower. This one I also gave 5 stars on Goodreads, and I do stand by that. So that is A Magic Steeped in Poison. Hello, this is Editing Gray popping in because I realized I forgot to specify Thumos Rising and Root and Bone are both E-arcs that I got from NetGalley that I then DNF'd. I don't think the problems in them are fixable, but take those DNF reviews with a grain of salt because they aren't actually the final copy, technically. The next book on my Goodreads is called Thumos Rising. I DNF'd it at 2% of the way through, and I tried to give it a fair shot, but I was physically gagging at how bad the writing was. This book is why I don't take people seriously when they say something like Gothicana is the worst book they've ever read. That one book was so bad that it has permanently skewed my opinion of anyone saying this is the worst book I've ever read. It was so dreadful, and I wanted it to be good. It was basically urban fantasy in space. So all of the tropes and species that you expect out of urban fantasy, but put them all in space. That was basically the pitch, and I was like, all right, cool. Oh, it's garbage. It's so bad. It was so bad. I legit could not read any farther. That book is the reason that other books do not get 1 star from me. That is the reason that I will be charitable and go 1.5 or even 2 stars when I DNF a book, because they're still not as bad as that. Oh my. Next book. I did not hate, I did not DNF, and in fact I love it. A Court of Thorns and Roses. I've talked about this a little bit. When I picked up A Court of Thorns and Roses, I was coming off a lot of books that involved a lot of oppression, that involved a lot of people dicking over the main character, and I was coming off a lot of series with horror themes. Like, my recommendations for people would be things like Jujutsu Kaisen. Oh, you're into manga? You're looking for a new manga? Can I recommend Jujutsu Kaisen? If you haven't read Jujutsu Kaisen, only read it if you are willing to go with a lot of body horror and other horror themes. It's kind of rough. Actually, you know, the body horror might be the smallest category of horror in there, but it's there. It's creepy. It's disturbing. It's really, really good. My recommendation for people for like something paranormal is like Other Side Picnic. Yeah, they're hunting urban legends, which are all like psychological monsters that burrow into your brain, and I will do a full series recap when the 4th volume comes out in English in July. When I read that, I'll do a full series overview and review. It's really good. I think Volume 4 is going to be the last one, so I'm going to wait till I read that and then review the whole thing. With all that in mind, I pick up this book, and the first few chapters are so boring. I didn't care. I should also mention, I did not have high hopes for this book, because the booktubers who I watched didn't like it. So I went, I'm going to give it a fair shot. I'm just going to skip all the bullshit and go to where the Fae show up. So I did. I skipped chapters 2 through 4. And then I kept reading. And then it turned out I really liked it. And as I kind of suggested in my intro video when I mentioned A Court of Thorns and Roses, it's so beautiful. There is a scene relatively early where Feyre walks out of the castle and into the gardens. She's just approaching this garden that's full of wildflowers because it's always spring here. And in my mind, I saw this beautiful sunny day and these just rows of color, these fields of color that she was walking towards. And I almost wanted to cry because it was just such a beautiful scene when I have been sitting with so much ugliness, when even the books that I really enjoyed had this, like, this shadow over top of them of oppression and violence and horrific things happening. And if you've read A Court of Thorns and Roses, this is the part where you go, ooh. But this book gave me something beautiful with no strings attached, because I already knew this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. There's a love story here. And it promised me a happy ending. And it turned out that I really, really needed a book that would give me something beautiful and promise a happy ending. And I loved it. I did eventually go back and read chapters 2 through 4. And then I gave the book 4 stars because I had to skip chapters 2 through 4 at first. I'm recording the next 2 books out of order because it's kind of driving me nuts having them on my desk and not back in their places on my bookshelf behind me. And my completionist brain demands that I share my thoughts. So, this is the Hurricane Wars. I did a full video review on this one. This is another one that Kate Corain had review bombed. It is... I saw a comment on Amazon, I think, that it was Reylo fanfic originally. I know nothing about that. I'm not a movie person. I haven't seen the new Star Wars movies. So... okay. What I know is that I found this to be a very satisfying book on its own, independent of any origin story it may or may not have. I gave it 4 stars. It is a fantasy political drama that was marketed as a war story romantasy. It is enemies to lovers. It's really good. It's 4 stars. I really like it. If you like political dramas, if you like enemies to lovers, and if you don't mind that the main barricade to the main couple just getting together is that they can't fucking talk about shit, definitely give it a try. And then, The Last Bloodcarver. This is a fun one. I actually found this one, I actually had this before it came out, because my local bookstore accidentally put it on the shelf a week early. So I snatched it up. And it actually did take me a little while to get through. The plot isn't what it appears to be in the beginning, and there was a sort of jarring shift for me, and I sort of put it down for a couple weeks. But I did finish it, and I gave this one 4 stars as well. This was overall a really good read. It has a lovely world that is, it feels real. It is another Own Voices one. It is Vietnamese inspired. And I don't know if her last name is pronounced Lee or La or Le. Apologize. I'm just going to stick with Vanessa. Vanessa does a really good job with making all of her characters into people and making the world into a real place. It's really well done. So this was another 4 star. All right, part 3 of recording my reading roundup for the year to date. So let's get to the next few books that I've read this year. After A Court of Thorns and Roses, I read Queen of Roses. This is the first in a series called Blood of a Fae, which is 4 books long. I'm currently in the middle of Court of Claws, which is book 2. It is an Arthurian-inspired romantasy. Our main character is Morgan Le Fay, currently known as Morgan Pendragon, and Arthur Pendragon is an irredeemable piece of shit tyrant of a king. So there's that. Also, fairly early on, Morgan kills a guy with her earring, and it's fantastic. The book is very slow burn. I believe it's billed as enemies to lovers. The two characters don't even kiss until Court of Claws, and that's super complicated. Like I said, I'm midway through Court of Claws, and they are currently, Morgan is kind of frosting out the very obvious love interest, while I just want to like forcibly grab their heads and shove them together and go kiss and then talk it out. Or talk it out and then fucking kiss already, because you two are both idiots. I did really like the book. There's something else that I didn't mention specifically about A Court of Thorns and Roses, that it also happens in Queen of Roses, and I appreciate it. Court of Thorns and Roses and Queen of Roses, both, they not only promise that things are going to work out in the end, they promise that the bad guys are going to die horribly. This is something that you normally get out of slasher movies, where you see the fucking asshole right there, and you're just waiting all movie for him to fucking die horribly, preferably choking on blood or with his guts spilling out of him, whatever. This is the joy of slasher movies. I have learned this from my boyfriend, who's a gigantic horror nerd. Anyway, I gave Queen of Roses a 4.5. I really did enjoy it a lot. I love Lancelot. Lancelot is now a lesbian playgirl knight who I adore. I cannot express how much I really, really enjoy watching the terrible people die in equally terrible ways. It is so satisfying and vindicating, and it just feels good. I think we all kind of want to see that happen in real life more often, and usually it just doesn't. Or if it does, it's after they've done so much harm that doesn't even really feel like a win anyway at that point. But in Queen of Roses, we don't have to wait very long. Yay! So that's Queen of Roses. Next book I read was Spin of Fate. I was super excited when I got approved for the e-arc of that book. I first heard about it from Reads with Rachel, and I was so excited. I might have made the NetGalley account. I might have finally gotten around to doing that specifically because of seeing that book on Reads with Rachel and her saying, oh yeah, it comes out in May. I'm like, what? I gotta find out if I can get it. And then I got approved and I was so hyped. I really did enjoy the book. There was some weird pacing. Again, I read this off NetGalley, so this was an e-arc. And depending how much got changed before publication, my rating could easily have changed from 3.75 to 4. I gave it 3.75 stars because of what felt like some weird pacing in like the first third to half. Like the book seemed like it had a really good first quarter, maybe first third, and then like from that point to slightly after the halfway point, it was okay. And then it just hit a roller coaster. And you just kind of hurtled at breakneck speed towards the ending. It was a really good ending. The characters feel like characters. The reason that it got 3.75 stars, 2 reasons. There was that pacing, and Ina feels younger than she's supposed to be. And I understand that she was raised by a single mom and it was just the two of them and they were very close. I understand. I was also raised by a widow and there were just the two of us and we were very close. I get it. She still felt closer to 12 than 16. I don't know that that could be adjusted except to age her down. I think if she was billed as 13 or 14, that emotional stunting of being in that very isolated relationship with just her mom, that difference of emotional development would ring much more true, and I could believe she was 13 or 14. But in the book, she's, I think, 16. And I don't buy that. She feels about 12, 10 to 12. So those were the 2 reasons, those were the 2 places that it lost stars. For plot reasons, for spoiler reasons, I don't know that Ina's characterization could be adjusted in a way that made her feel 16. But I think the pacing could be cleaned up, and if they did clean it up between the e-arc and publication, then it's easily a 4 star. I just haven't been able to afford to pick up the book and find out for myself. Next, and I think I actually finished this before Spin of Fate, but it took me longer to put it on my Goodreads and review it. Next up was Fourth Wing. My grandma apparently bought my mom Fourth Wing. I don't know why. My mom also owns Iron Flame. I did not read my mom's copies. I actually didn't read with my eyeballs these books at all. Fourth Wing was my gateway into audiobooks. Because I zone out a lot, I have been very leery of audiobooks because it's like, so I have to like sit still and listen, and what happens if I zone out and I'm gonna miss stuff? And it's, well, after about 5 hours of reads with Rachel thoroughly dissecting Fourth Wing, and I was pretty sure I wouldn't care if I missed anything in Fourth Wing. So that made it the perfect book to just try doing it in audiobook form. Also, the audiobook had a much shorter wait list on Libby. But I did successfully listen to the whole thing, and I realized that I really enjoyed it. I gave it 3.5 stars. The reason it didn't get any higher is I kind of had to ask myself, if this wasn't an audiobook, if this book only progressed when I sat down and looked at the words and processed them, if I had to drive myself through the story instead of someone else driving it for me through my ears, would I have finished it? This thing's kind of a doorstop, and it's entertaining and fun, but would I have finished it if I had to rely only on myself? And I had to say, no, I don't think I would have. So, 3.5 stars. Enjoyable, give it a shot. I'm not sorry I read it, but it's not high on my reread list either. It did really help me with getting into audiobooks, because it did give me sort of that jumping off point where, okay, now I know I can listen to audiobooks, so that was super important to me. Next up is Little Thieves by Margaret Owen. I don't think I actually read my own copy of this book, except for like maybe the last 50 pages. I did the first half of this as an audiobook. I read the last half of this. I think it was right at page 300 that I switched, and I read the last half of this with my eyes, because I can read faster with my eyes than I can listen to an audiobook. And I just really needed to know what would happen as fast as I could possibly take it in. So I read it. I read the book, and the ebook or paper book instead of the audiobook for the last half of it. I gave this book 5 stars. This is a mesmerizing, dazzling, stunning masterpiece of young adult fantasy. I can't think of a single thing I would change. The plot is well constructed. The world building is spectacular. The characters resonate like real people. The first scene of the book that is not like prologue, the main character Vanya is playing this game in her head of Find the Lady. You know, you've got 3 cards, one of them's the queen, keep track, where's the queen, where's the queen, you get a prize if you get the queen. And she's keeping track of her own heist by a mental game of Find the Lady. Margaret Owen constructs her plot like a game of Find the Lady. You can see, if you are following the right thing the whole time, you can see what's coming. But she is so good at moving the pieces and drawing your attention away that you probably didn't pay enough attention for that. You probably didn't track the right thing. It's absolutely brilliant. I love this book so much. I am so excited to read Painted Devils. It's off to a very strong start. The reason that I haven't read it faster is that these books are long, and getting into a long book is intimidating for me every time. Okay, so another one that I DNF'd. Root and Bone, first in a series called Spencer Sisters. I got a little bit further than I did in Thumos Rising. I got a few chapters in. But I didn't care. And worse than not caring, I actively hated the main characters. I hated the Spencer sisters. I'm probably going to get their names wrong in this discussion. Oh boy. The first time you meet Jewel, one of the sisters, she drugged her husband and snuck out to the bar where her sister, who I think is named Leona, works. And then her husband wakes up from being drugged by his wife, shows up at the bar and is demanding to take her home, and the older sister, who's supposed to be the responsible one, tells her ghost friend to possess this drugged up husband. He has been drugged. He was sedated and put unconscious against his will by someone we're supposed to like. So they need a ghost friend to possess him and have him pass out in the back seat so that he doesn't make too much of a scene and so that Jewel can just fuck off and do whatever, I guess. This is our introduction to Jewel. This is our introduction to the sisters dynamic. There's like offhanded comments about him beating her. First of all, I don't believe it. Second of all, even if I believed it, I don't believe that it started before she started drugging him. And at that point, I kinda stop caring, because at most it's mutual abuse. But I don't believe it. And it's not addressed because apparently we're not supposed to care. We're just supposed to accept that this husband is just the worst dickbag to ever dickbag. This is just the worst dickbag to ever bag a dick. And he's just horrible, and so Jewel is totally justified in drugging him. And Leona is like, Jewel, you can't just go around drugging your husband. And Jewel's like, well, I just did. And I'm like, well, you both suck. You both suck, and I hate you both, and I don't want to spend another page with you. But I did give it a little longer. Then about 2 scenes later, Leona drugs someone. Well, enchants, bespells, ensorcels, those with a pinch of blue powder, and the woman just is ranting at empty air thinking that Leona's there while Leona goes in, raids her house. Sorry. Makes an unauthorized investigation of a crime scene without telling the cops, steals a piece of evidence, and I don't care why. I don't care that it was a curse bag. I don't even... I actually don't think she did it for any good reason. Just like, oh, well, there's some woo stuff, and they don't do woo stuff. I'm like, but the synopsis of the book said that you two are known to be practitioners. So couldn't you just go to the cops and say, hey, I think we should be there because there's some woo stuff? That way you don't break the chain of custody, taint the crime scene, leave your own fingerprints all over the bedroom of a deceased woman. I decided that even if I was willing to put up with the plot, which I didn't give a shit about, I was not willing to spend any more time with these characters because they're just genuinely dreadful people. Jewel uses drugs, Leona uses magic, but they both just calmly, casually, like it means nothing and there's just no reason that you wouldn't, they just strip away other people's free will. And I'm not okay with that. I gave it 1.5 stars because, again, wasn't as bad as Thumos Rising. Okay, 2 books left by my count. Both of them very highly rated, at least by me. To me, these are almost or outright perfect books. First book is 7 Faceless Saints. This is a murder mystery. In fact, in the acknowledgments at the end, the author says that this came about because they really wanted to write a murder mystery. This is by M.K. Lobb. It's a debut novel, first in a duology. Yes, I have started the second book. No, I have not finished it, naturally. This book is really good. It does a lot of dissection of class structure. The class structure in this world is basically, do you have magic or not? If yes, your life is decided for you because you're probably going to be in service to your particular saint. They call their deities saints. You're going to be in service to your saint forever. If you don't have magic, well, we're just going to leave you by the wayside. So from where I'm sitting, both paths suck. This book I gave a 4.75 stars. There was a twist that was so obvious to me I forgot that the characters were still operating under the opposite assumption. But the real reason that it didn't get 5 stars is this book doesn't feel like a young adult book. It feels like a new adult book, or even an adult book. Like, I reviewed Fourth Wing, and when I was about midway through Seven Faceless Saints, I said, Fourth Wing feels like young adult that they aged up because they wanted to do things that kids can't do. Seven Faceless Saints feels like an adult book that they aged down because they thought it was too short. I stand by that. These are teenagers who have been to war. These are teenagers who have sex. Almost on page, it's very close fade to black. This doesn't feel like a young adult book. This book would make so much more sense. This book would just be better if the characters were 21 or 22. But it's billed as young adult, and I don't like it as much as young adult. If it was a new adult, 21, 22-year-old characters, this would be a perfect book. Or just about. I'd probably still have to give it a little bit of a ding because the one twist, the author did get me with the one immediately following it. But just that one little thing. Maybe it's because I was bouncing between audiobook and paper book, or ebook. And maybe I wouldn't have noticed this as easily if I was in the ebook at that point, but it really stuck out to me. There was this little hint, this little bit of foreshadowing that stuck so hard that I legitimately kept forgetting that the characters had not figured it out. So that's Seven Faceless Saints. And the last book of our almost mid-year reading roundup is An Enchantment of Ravens by Margaret Rogerson. This is a perfect book. There is not a single thing I would change. There was a point fairly near the start where I thought that it was going to go in one direction and I wasn't happy about it, and I thought, well, this is going to get boring. I was wrong. It did not go that direction. It went a very different direction, and I loved it. An Enchantment of Ravens is a love story set in a world where the fair folk mingle with and play patron to human artisans. The fair folk cannot do craft. Craft means anything that creates or transforms things in any non-natural way. At one point, the main fair folk, the main human, shoves a skewer at the main fair folk and goes, well, you cook it if you're so clever. And just holding the meat over the fire, he almost turns to dust. The fair folk cannot, physically cannot, and if they try, it will kill them. They cannot do craft. So they love it. They crave it. They go looking for craft. The main character is the greatest portrait artist of her generation. She's not being egotistical. She knows for a fact that no other portrait artist is going to get fair folk patronage until she dies. And this is a love story. But in this world, there is the good law. Humans and fair folk cannot fall in love. That violates the good law. One of them has to die because they cannot be in love. Or the human has to become fair folk. You know where this is going. But we already know that the main character is a portrait artist. She does craft. She lives and breathes her craft. So she's not going to drink from the well and become a fair folk. And I'm going to leave it there. That one I gave 5 stars. Both it and Seven Faceless Saints I highly recommend. Like I said, Seven Faceless Saints is an almost perfect book. Enchantment of Ravens I consider a perfect book. Enchantment of Ravens is pretty short, so if you don't have a lot of time, you can still pick it up. It's like, I think the print book was like 300 pages or a little less. The audiobook is really good. I wasn't a huge fan of how the narrator did the fair folks voice, because to get a man's voice, it ended up sounding like this, with a very, like, I'm not sure how to describe this tone, but it didn't quite work for me. But the enunciation, emphasis, tenor, cadence is the word I'm looking for. Cadence, all of that, really good. Anyway, just to wrap up, so overall it's been a pretty good reading year so far. I've gotten more comfortable with DNFing books if they're just atrocious, or if I just personally want to bash the main character's head in with a rock. So, that's about it. Good number of 5 stars so far, lots of fun books. Oh, I didn't put 5 Broken Blades. I have not marked that as read yet. 5 Broken Blades. It's not on my Goodreads, so I forgot about it. 5 Broken Blades deserves its own video. I want to do a video specifically for 5 Broken Blades because it's 3.5 stars. I gave it 3.5 stars. But I really liked it. It was a lot of fun for me. The first half was super... I was not sold in the first half. The things that I wasn't sold on got better. Things started moving along. I really enjoyed the second half of it. And it's a really fast read. It took me less than a week to read, and I don't binge read like a lot of booktubers. So 3.5 stars because that was a really rocky first half, and I wasn't... When I compare it against books that I gave 4 stars or better, it's 3.5 stars. But it's really fun. I do recommend it if you enjoy heist novels and heist stories. It kind of plays out like a fantasy Ocean's 11, except everybody gets paired off by the end. Kind of. There's more romance than Ocean's 11, but it is kind of like a fantasy Ocean's 11. You can even like hear the Ocean's 11 music starting to pick up at the end of the book. Like you can hear that music, like from Ocean's 11 or Leverage or any of those stories, those heist stories. You can hear that kind of music picking up. It's so nailed the ending. A+ on the ending. 10 out of 10 on the ending. But it gets knocked down because that first half felt undercooked. Which it is Red Tower, and I'm sure a lot of people will say, like, that's the thing about Red Tower, it doesn't save time for editing, and it's not that I disagree per se. It's that I think Red Tower absolutely nails the fun aspect, and I think that's what they're picking books for. But this could have used some editing on the first half, and you can tell how rushed it is because it doesn't have any blurbs on it. So, there it is. 3.5 stars, really fun read, really fast read. I do recommend it. And I'm going to be honest, I like the sprayed edges. Like, they did a stenciling and a really cool little scene on the sprayed edges. I think it looks really cool. That should actually be the reading roundup done up through May 28th. I don't think there's anything else that was not on my Goodreads. Yeah, overall, good year so far. Jujutsu Kaisen. New book of that came out, and I did read that. Jujutsu Kaisen is my favorite manga since I was a kid reading a ton of manga. It's my favorite manga that I've read as an adult. Jujutsu Kaisen brought me back to what the fantastic thing about Japanese media is, in a way that I don't think something has since Kingdom Hearts. Japan gets unapologetically, unflinchingly weird. And Jujutsu Kaisen is so fucking good at that. I might have to do a video on that too, because Jujutsu Kaisen, like, the whole thing has been just 5 stars for me. Just beautiful perfection. They're doing such a good job at where to cut the graphic novels, because I finished 22 and I'm like, where the fuck's 23? Excuse me, where's 23? And then I know that 23 is probably going to jump to a different group, because right now we've got people in like 3 different areas, and the story of Jujutsu Kaisen starts with the main character eating a mummified finger. And it turns out that this kid has like a con score of 24, and actually it's not that. He's got like a will save and fort save of like plus 24. And just like completely overpowers basically a demon that he just ate the finger of, because the demon's trying to possess him. That's as normal as the book's gonna get. We've got my personal favorite character, who you can just see as Funko Pop there, Kage Inomaki, who is a cursed speech user. If he is talking, you're gonna listen and you're gonna obey, because what he says is gonna become real. So what does he do? Fish flakes. Salmon. He speaks in rice ball fillings. Pickled cabbage. We know that salmon is yes, fish flakes is no, and everything else is gibberish. But he only speaks in rice ball fillings because if he says anything with meaning behind it, it's dangerous. And that was probably the point where I went, this is so fucking weird and I love it so much. We have Panda, who is introduced at first with Panda is a panda. Spoiler alert, later on there is a panel where it says Panda is not a panda. Not gonna tell you what the context is, just trust me, there's a panda. He is, but is not, a panda. We have, again, let's see if you can just kind of see his standee back there. Nanamin. I have adopted our main character's nickname for him, Nanamin. He gets more powerful when he's on overtime. And then in one of the most recent books, we had a guy whose entire power is based around a pachinko machine. Not like the actual machine, like his power creates the setting that's demonstrated in the pachinko machine, and it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's wonderful. It's so good. Every time you read a manga, there will be parts that are said and they don't quite sound like how a person says them. And I don't know how much of that is because, like, Japan has Shinto, right? It's got a much more animistic, or somewhat animistic, closer to animism, approach to spirituality than a lot of white America does. A lot of America in general tends to be Christian or otherwise monotheistic or atheistic. So I don't know how much of this sort of uncanny verbiage is due to like a culture of having spirits around and among people, and how much is just due to translation and ideas not translating super cleanly. But it's always really cool and kind of eerie what comes out of it. Like an idea that with identical twins, their cursed techniques are bound by each other because let's just call it, their mana basically is treating them as one individual. Because they're identical twins. They started out as one zygote. and their sort of mana pool and their magical ability is contained between them as though they were still one entity. And when that is explained, it is so... it makes perfect sense, and it makes no sense. And that is a thing that I find in a lot of really good manga. Really good manga has those things where these concepts are explained and you understand it, but you couldn't explain it for the life of you. Like, I just explained that thing about identical twins, but if you ask me to explain how this actually works in practice and like what the interactions are, I'm probably gonna sound like I'm talking nonsense. But it makes so much sense as you read it. I freaking love Jujutsu Kaisen. I think it is just the best manga that I have read in such a long time, and it's competing with Demon Slayer, which I also would probably give 5 stars, but Jujutsu Kaisen is like 5 stars and keeps getting better. Demon Slayer is still really, really good. I still probably give it 5 stars because it's just excellent. Jujutsu Kaisen is excellent and keeps getting more excellent. It is the best manga I've read in ages. I love it so much. I don't own the books because there's so many and they just get expensive, so I just get them from the library. But like, as you can kind of see, and as I've kind of pointed out, like, I have several figures and things. I even have a plushie of Inumaki that I picked up at Gen Con last year, so maybe one day I'll do a plushie tour, who knows. Yeah. Alright. Jujutsu Kaisen. Now we're calling it good. We're calling it. Video's over. No more is allowed to be added. If I remember anything else, it's just gotta get its own video.